Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this first in our series. It's the April Earthy Matters series, and as I'm sure you all know, that April is Earth Month with the Earth Day on April 22nd, I believe. To get us into the purpose of this, before we start into our presentation, we have a PBS Learning Media license. And I think it's worth going back and looking at why we're doing this.
The 60s brought the flowering of conservation. It was propelled by many things: air and water pollution, sprawl and development, massive fish kills and endangered birds, the Cuyahoga River catching on fire, and oil spills off California and Cornwall. But the real consciousness changer was seeing Earth from space.
In 69 and 70, we started to get real photographs of the Earth from space that completely changed people's perspective on themselves and their role on the planet. They were stunning because you saw a green, blue, cloud-bedecked, living planet in the background with, in the foreground, a dead moon with nothing but craters. The life-death image all combined in one beautiful and compelling scene was what people, I think, began to realize, that we could be the moon. We could be as dead as the moon.
All the social and political ferment that was going on in this country was building up and building up and building up. And on Earth Day 1970, it was like water bursting through a dam.
But I think you have to start out looking at the big picture. The big picture is that we live on a finite planet with a limited capacity to sustain life.
If we do not save the environment, then whatever we do in civil rights or in a war against poverty will be of no meaning, because then we will have the equality of extinction.
Earth pollution is mind pollution.
20 million people came out for the first Earth Day, still the largest demonstration ever. It catalyzed the transition from conservation to a new environmental movement and the next big issue, pollution.
I have a sneaky feeling that the recent Women's March may have exceeded that 20 million mark, but I think it's worth remembering that the first Earth Day took place in April 1970. That's 47 years ago. How far have we really come in that time? And as we seem to be at great risk of turning back the clock, or at least that seems to be the feeling overall, when our organization, WasteWater Education, began discussing how to and what we wanted to do during Earth Month 2017, it really was very tempting to look at all the negatives, all of the potential threats to our environment. And we chose instead to take a sort of positive view and focusing on what will and what is driving the conservation and environmental protection movement. And that really is that we've come a long way toward having entrepreneurs and committed professionals who have learned that, yes, you can have your cake and you can eat it too, or in this case, as we're going to hear today, drink it. The oft misquoted line from Benjamin Franklin, that beer is proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy. Although we need to remember he was actually talking about wine when he wrote that original letter. It isn't actually that far from the truth. Throughout history, the brewing process has often made beer much safer to drink than water. The phrase small beer, which was watered down beer, which was given to children. It was the relative absence of cholera afflicting the nearby brewery workers that helped the famous Dr. John Snow determine that it was the Broad Street public drinking water well that was harboring the cholera pathogens and not the air, as was the prevailing theory of how cholera spread during those terrible epidemics that afflicted London during the 19th century. So our Earthy Matters series is dealing with rethinking how we use and reuse our precious water resources. You know, Snow's revelations revolutionized sanitation and water system and municipal treatment. But as we really are well into the 21st century, then the next story really is just beginning. And just to set the scene here, in 2015, Forbes magazine published an article, and we're going to provide you a link for that at the end of this session today, that the next big startup that would drive economy, particularly in rural areas and small urban areas, would be craft brewing. The craft beer boom, it's led to an explosion of specialty craft and micro brewers, following in the footsteps, obviously, of folks like Ken Grossman, who founded Sierra Nevada, or Jim Koch from Sam Adams. In fact, by the end of 2014, there were over 3,400 breweries in the United States. And remember, the post-prohibition low in about 1979, there were just 44. So we've gone from 44 to 3,400 breweries. And with that note, I'd like to introduce you to one of these breweries and one of the Brew Masters. And we're going to talk about how the ethics and the planning and the founding of Brewery Terra Firma not only are part of this explosion of small microbreweries, but also how in tune they are with protecting water resources. So, John, would you go ahead and unpause your microphone to switch?
Okay.
And mute my.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is John Niedermaier. I am the founder and brewer of Brewery Terra Firma in Traverse City, Michigan. We are the first agricultural brewery in Michigan, and the reason that really came about was that 20-some years ago, when I started, when I became a commercial brewer, the brewing process was just fascinating, and it involved art, it involved cooking, it involved science, and really all the things that I really enjoyed. One of the things that I didn't like all that much was the fact that breweries, especially at that time and prior to that, had been not as efficient as they could have been. So one of the things I really wanted to tackle was to take the inefficiencies that a lot of breweries have, and if possible, either remove those inefficiencies or even better yet, turn them into something that is a positive resource that we could utilize in brewing today. I've seen around the country a lot of breweries, large breweries, and even small breweries, and many small breweries in tiny little communities where they are really overwhelming their wastewater system in these communities, because the general idea was that if you're going to be brewing beer, then you're going to really, for every pint that you produce, there's going to be approximately 7 pints of waste that are going to go down the drain somewhere. So the inefficiency of that was really hard for me to deal with. Most breweries will handle the solids and the spent grains and the hops and the yeast and all that stuff and give it to farmers and what have you, but not a lot was being done with wastewater, short of really just kicking the can down the road and doing what a lot of other breweries have done in the past, which was build really expensive wastewater treatment facilities on site or pre-treatment facilities on site to handle some of that liquid waste and clean it up before they put it down the municipal wastewater system. And I really started thinking about how breweries used to be in this country before Prohibition, and going back to the even the early colonial breweries and how they dealt with this stuff, and Canadian breweries such as Molson and the Molson family way back when, and how they used to deal with this stuff. And and all these breweries were really on farms, and as a result, they had easy access to property where they could take this food grade material and compost it or use it as irrigation or fertigation out there to grow some of these other materials that they would in turn go ahead and use back on the farm or back in the brewery, take from the farm and bring back into the brewery. So that's really why Brewery Terra Firma is located on a farm. We are on a 10-acre farm for that reason. So so the goal was really to be able to try and have an efficient way to harvest a lot of that liquid waste, which is substantial, even though we really try hard to minimize that to begin with. We have harvested and repurposed, I think the number is somewhere around 160,000 gallons of liquid waste here on our farm, and we do that in conjunction with the DEQ and a land application permit, and we analyze our waste and submit that information quarterly, I believe, and keep a close eye on what nutrients are being taken up and what is being utilized on the property. And we are noticing through soil analysis that we're seeing a lot of soil building, a lot of positive things that are coming from the soil here that were really not, that was not the case. The property sat vacant for quite some time and was not a actual farmed piece of property for a number of years. So we are seeing this all going in the right direction at this point. So as you can see, we've got a lot of stuff going on. We do, and bear with me, I've never used this format before, so I'm learning as I go, or trying to, but we do have some other stuff to show you, but let me thumb through this here real quick. I'm trying to understand where we are here. So the facility is really is the first one in Michigan. We're the first agricultural brewery here, and we had a lot of great support from our local government here, also from the ATF, or what is the TTB nowadays, and the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality. We're also a MEAP certified farm, and we're really still relatively new. You can see that from the aerial here that our property is set up, and this changes from year to year based on what we're growing, but you can see that we have that it's set up a little bit differently than maybe a traditional farm, as you might see, where the fields are one particular type of crop and they're solid, because we're land applying this liquid effluent. We have to be able to get in between the plantings and the rows. So this is an earlier on photo, but it shows that we have a field, an east field on the right here, and a south field at the bottom of the screen. And you can kind of visualize this is a 10-acre property. And in the upper left-hand corner is our production facility and tap room and loading dock on the back. We sell beer statewide throughout in every county in Michigan. And the fact that we are able to use this liquid waste, and we're not on the waste stream system here for Traverse City. That people are really excited about that. We have a lot of breweries in Traverse City, and it has had a big impact on the waste system in town. So by not actually contributing to that, we feel a whole lot better about everything we do here, and we've got a lot of people that are interested in looking at this type of a brewing system, and and we can't really even take all the credit for it. This is this is how things used to be done many years ago. A great example I use a lot is Mount Vernon. George Washington's home was an 8,000 acre farm. It was also practically a hotel. Also a brewery and a distillery, and a lot of these techniques, of course, when he bought a lot of beer, but when he couldn't get the beer he wanted, he brewed beer, and while he did that on the farm, he was able to take those materials and compost them and use them back out, out in the farmland. So we're really kind of looking back to the way things used to be. Yep.
You're also today, and if you would just mute your microphone.
Sure.
Yeah, also joining us today is the person who's in charge of the wastewater system and the wastewater design, Charlie.
Okay, so you can hear me again. So as this company was actually the progress of the brewery was a long one. Many years ago at another brewery that is no longer there in Elk Rapids, where I worked for many years, it was a substantial piece of property. It was and so the idea of trying to utilize our the waste that was being produced at that site was really kind of founded there, and they did some things differently there. Took a lot of the spent material, the solids, the spent grains, and the yeast and the hops and some of the other materials that are used in the brewing process, and it was actually was being utilized by local farmers for filler feed for chickens and pigs and cows and so on, and we will, and that's kind of where it started. And so I guess we're going to move on to a video real quick.
Go ahead, John.
Okay. I think I'm back. So the evolution of this whole thing was really a very long process, but I was able to see some some breweries around the country that were that really weren't even paying attention to the liquid waste. As I said, generally it's about 7 to 1 on average. I had heard about some large commercial breweries that were overwhelming their local wastewater treatment facilities and were being forced to either relocate or pay huge fines to try and make it work. And I've heard that some of the liquid waste from some of these facilities was in the ballpark of 17 to 1, which is just crazy. But they will say, well, we really weren't tracking any of that. They just really pay attention to the actual physical spent materials, the solids, and everything else, well, it just goes down the drain and you don't think about it. That's changed a lot in recent years, in the past 5 years or more, at least in Michigan. So I think people are really, as a result of seeing the efforts of breweries, not just Brewery Terra Firma, but others around the country that are, and not even just breweries, we're also seeing this method being introduced or being pursued by distilleries and wineries and cideries as well. So I think it really has a lot of potential, and I think it can be very advantageous for small communities like Traverse City, for instance, who is a small community but has a lot of breweries and a lot of wineries. And so I think that is something that as we go forward, I would like to see the ability of a brewery or a winery or a distillery to make it easy for them to be able to utilize this type of a system, even if it means that the facility, the production facility itself, is not able, for a variety of reasons, to be located on a farm. It is far less efficient, but those liquid effluent materials and spent grains and byproducts must from a brewery or even meaderies can be transported, and those kind of relationships can be built with farmers who are not necessarily involved in the business. You can go out and make those handshake relationships and have the farmers go through the licensing and go through all that has to be done to be able to utilize that material, and it will be beneficial to them as well. So I would like to see it become easier for future facilities to be able to utilize the system that we have in place with our local government agencies here. So that's a pretty wonderful thing, and you can see by some of the slides here, we've got we grow it. We use that liquid waste to help us grow. I mean, it's really a slurry of food grade materials that you would compost. A lot of it in liquid form, the hops and the yeast. We also have a lot of single pass process water, cooling water, large quantities of just pure water that gets captured and applied to our farmland so that we can grow buckwheat for bees, for bee forage, and then use that honey in the beer. In fact, we just released our early summer release of a very summery beer that we do called Beehive Honey Blonde. That has honey. All the honey in it comes from our hives in the South Field from last year, from our 2016 harvest. We also have wildflowers that we plant, and those wildflowers are utilized as bee forage. We also have expanded our hop yard from our South Field to our East Field, and you can see that's a picture of the South Field there. Our hops are then harvested in the fall, and we will either dry them and bale them and use them in some of our beers, or in the fall we will do a series of harvest ales, some not so conventional. We do a wet hop IPA called Indigenous that we have, actually we no longer have on tap. We just lost it. We tried to save some for our tap room, but those hops are actually literally utilized from our hop yard, and as we harvest these materials that we are using our liquid waste to help irrigate, or fertigate, I should say, we actually give a really strong value-added experience to our customers. For instance, when we harvest our hops in the fall for our Indigenous wet hop IPA that we do every fall, they get to come in and we cut some of the bines down and bring them into our exterior beer garden, where they're able to hand pick with us the hop cones directly off of the vine, and then we bring them into our brewery the following morning right away inside of 24 hours, and we use them to brew the Indigenous beer with, Indigenous wet hop IPA, and then they are absolutely dying to try that beer. And here's actually a picture of this is actually a hop back that we take those whole cone hops from the south field and utilize them in what's really a giant pressure cooker. We heat them, but not to the point of boiling. The heat, of course, sterilizes the hops, but also we're making tea with that particular unit, and what we will do is strip the oils off of that, and that will give the Indigenous the depth and complexity that particular harvest ale has. And we'll continue to do more of this in the as we go forward. But when your customers see all of the added value that you're giving them, not just because they really enjoy the product, but because they were able to watch those materials grow on the farm, and they were able to take part in the harvest. And once they take part in that harvest and the beer goes on tap, they are absolutely falling over themselves to try and get some of that product to share with their friends, and they tell our story, and they turn into wonderful salespeople for Brewery Terra Firma, and that is a fabulous thing. And you can see here in this slide we have pumpkins that we raised in our east field last year, and we harvested those. So the ability, one of the nice things about being on the farm, and a pumpkin ale is a great example, is that a lot of breweries are using extracts and flavorings. And so for instance, pumpkin ales are very, very popular nowadays. They have not always been, but when those products hit the market, people will say, that the pumpkin ales are coming out early and early and earlier, but ours is not. Our pumpkin ales are not on the market at the same time, simply because the pumpkins aren't ripe. And so when people come out to the brewery and say, "Where is the pumpkin ale?" we can point out the field and say, "Well, the pumpkins are out there, so that's why they're not. The beer is not on tap yet, because we are using pumpkins right here from the farm, and we grow them." So that is kind of in a nutshell there, a little quick thing. You can see again that south field hop yard, and which we've expanded into the east field, and then on the left here is a big tote that's full of spent cereal grains from the brewery, and those can either be composted or land applied. They're loaded with water. They break down very, very quickly. They make great fertilizer, and because of the fact that they can hold a fair amount of water, it's really just bran, saturated bran with water alone. Plants really, really love it. So that's another wonderful thing to trying to utilize all these materials on the farm. And it looks like we're going to show another video here. This is actually, we did a series of time-lapse fermentations to kind of get some sort of an idea of what happens with our yeast. This is an IPA that I believe we did for Earth Day, called Earth Day IPA, and it really shows how fast and hard that fermentation proceeds. So this is really all yeast, and you can see cooling coils on the side. We also harvest the BTUs from our cooling system and pump that into the floor in the winter months to help with our heating bill, which really helps quite a bit. But it's just kind of fun to see that's probably the first 12 hours or so of fermentation. We're one of the major positive points of doing something like this on agricultural property is that it really helps distinguish Brewery Terra Firma from other breweries, and we get an enormous amount of added value from agricultural based organizations and tour organizations, and when they come to the brewery and they find that not only hopefully they really enjoy the product, but that they also find out all this other stuff about the brewery and how we're doing all this effluent reclamation and harvesting our BTUs and our solids and using all of that, the impact that has on our clientele outside of just simply being another brewery that brews beer, really solidifies the relationship between the customer and the brewery itself. So it is really a big bonus. That kind of in a market which is just flooded with breweries right now, especially in Michigan. And I'm sure elsewhere, this is actually a global thing, but they're looking for some reason to get behind a brewery, and they want to feel better about the places where they go. Just like the reason people go to farmers markets, they want to shake hands with the farmer, and they want to know what kind of person that person is, and are they going to go the extra mile to try and be as environmentally conscious as possible, and to take some steps towards trying to rethink some things, and can we make things better and do things smarter. And that is in a market that is so overwhelmingly packed with producers and people jumping into the market, and people who have never worked in a brewery before jumping into the market. That added value is just huge. It's just a wonderful added bonus, and I hadn't really thought that part through when it came time to designing the brewery and the kind of the direction of this brewery. And that seems to be getting stronger and stronger, and it increases more word of mouth, and people are just very, very excited about it. And that is something that I think is really worth looking at if someone is looking to open a brewery or a winery or a distillery or something like that. And there's, I'm sure, lots of other applications for the kind of general idea here to be utilized. You know, I think that's really something that needs to be considered, and I'm hoping that Brewery Terra Firma, being somewhat of a model early on in the agricultural brewery business, is going to have a positive impact and help people make the decision to go through the extra steps to try and do something better that doesn't add to the problem, but just makes it a little bit better. So you can see we do a lot of stuff with a lot of local businesses. Anytime that we don't necessarily, the goal is not to be sustainable completely here at the brewery on the farm, because we really want to be able to utilize other materials that are grown elsewhere. We want to support our local farmers. And so when we were approached by the Nature Conservancy here in Traverse City that said, we're having our 75th anniversary of the Conservancy, we want to do something really special. We worked directly with them, with some farmers that they worked with, and brewed a very special beer that we aged in bourbon barrels. And you can see from the picture here, these are bourbon barrels from a local distillery we have here called Traverse City Whiskey Company. And we utilize local maple syrup, local Michigan-grown corn, our local honey. We used local cherries. We used a whole variety of local ingredients, and then aged the beer in these bourbon barrels for a period of time right up to the point where the 75th anniversary party happened at the Conservancy. And we called it, actually initially it was called Education Ale, but they had a naming contest, and I think the winner was Cherry Potion number 75 or something like that. But the beer was phenomenal, and because it was, and it's long, long gone, but because it was used so many local ingredients from local farmers, we were able to cross promote with them. And it was really a huge offering. Unfortunately, we couldn't make a lot of it. You know, we could only make, our minimum was about 8 bourbon barrels worth, and it all was sold and is unfortunately long gone. But people still talk about it today. So, and a lot of it is really because of that that feeling that customers get from using something very, very local. I can see we can perhaps Charlie can speak a little bit about the MEAP program. I'm seeing some notes from Dendra here.
Yeah, unfortunately, Charlie is having some technical difficulties, so we will add his document later. But let's do a screen share for the MEAP program so you can tell people basically what it is and how it works, okay?
Okay, I think I'm back on. Wow. MEAP certification. The MEAP program is a great voluntary organization that really helps a lot of farms really be stewards to their property and the environment, and to do a variety of of steps and precautions and things that will help avoid problems on the farm as time goes on, such as storing some of your materials, oils and so on that you might use for your tractors, or a lot of the materials and stuff that you'd have on the farm, to store those safely. And they just have a whole series of steps and things that you can do that will help ensure that your property stays clean and uncontaminated by a variety of things that I think a lot of people just don't necessarily think about or don't realize can and have caused problems in the past. So MEAP is a great, again, a voluntary organization. In the certification process, I think we are the first brewery that has been certified by the MEAP program, and so we have a big sign out front, and we're very proud of it, and we continue to help them any way we can. There really is a great organization, and it's really pretty simple to go through the steps and to get certified. You'll have somebody that'll come on the property and go through and look at everything and make sure they're really a very easygoing organization to deal with. So don't think twice about reaching out to them, even just to get some initial information. They've got a great team of people, and they're happy to help, and they are really good with questions and so forth. So I would recommend looking into the MEAP certification program to anyone.
Okay, we're going to wrap up here shortly. If you have questions, if you would like to ask them in person, do raise your hand or let us know in the chat window. We apologize that Charlie Kinzel was not able to join us, but there will be a document available later if you registered to describe really what the wastewater treatment process is and how it was designed. John, would you like to wrap up your presentation?
Sure. Actually, I've just been joined by Charlie. He's walked in the door here. I don't know if you want to proceed with talking with him. He's going to have to sit in my place.
That would be cool. Put your webcam on, John.
Okay. Start sharing. Okay, we're back. Okay, I will, do you want to start? Do you want to talk to Charlie right now? Okay. Here we go. Second step.
Good afternoon. I'm Charlie, Vice President, Brewery Terra Firma. Can you hear?
Hi there.
Or you have to watch the text?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We muted my microphone because we don't want feedback from yours. Go ahead and tell us about wastewater.
Well, we've heard John talk about his vision of putting Brewery Terra Firma back on the farm to address some of the issues of recycling and reuse and water conservation. And my background is in facilities engineering. I worked with a very large food organization, and I learned a lot about process and facilities design from a sanitary food production standpoint. And when John told me about what he wanted to do, I was very excited about that. although we live in northern Michigan, where fresh water is quite abundant, the responsible use and conservation of it, I think, is of unbelievable importance. And I was excited that it was also important to John and to be a part of designing the building to address some of these issues, to separate the waste streams, to reuse our gray water, to recapture BTUs in the brewing process to heat the building. So the nuts and bolts of how these things work are what I contribute to the project. So when we look at our gray water, and we looked at it from John's home brewing experience, his pilot system at home generated our first test batches of gray water that we used to model our DEQ land application permit and process, and to learn that the gray water that we were generating was really quite benign, and the biodegradable chemicals, the caustic replacement things that we used in our process, that all came together to help us and to allow us to be in compliance and have a gray water. Got enough to go on. We might want to plug in. Okay, so we constructed the brewery to be, the waste streams are separated. We do have sanitary septic system for the rest of the front of the house, but everything that's not beer or doesn't end up in a beer can or a beer keg in the brew house actually goes to a separate capture tank, and all that together and diluted with the gray water that's generated from washing and filling kegs of beer, from washing and sanitizing the production equipment, to single pass heat exchanger water for cooling wort in our brewing process. All that comes together in a single capture tank. There is no outlet to it. Our brewery is not connected to the septic system. It is not connected to a sewer system. We pump all that out into the back of a tank in a pickup truck, and we have that applied to the field. It's a beautifully simple system that really doesn't require any additional processing, and we minimize our dwell time in the tank to make sure that we're not growing any anaerobic bacteria in there, so we don't have any odor issues with our neighbors with our application process. It's just raw sugars from the grain, some yeast. At worst case, it smells maybe a little bit like bad beer, but it really doesn't have much odor to it at all, and it's good nutrients for the field.
Okay, everyone, if the attendees have any questions at this time, you can either raise your hand and ask them in person, in which case we'll give you a microphone, or we can accept your questions in the chat window.
It stands for Michigan Agricultural Environmental Assurance Program, MEAP. Basically, it centers around an open book disclosure to this program, disclosing your practices, your policies for everything from soil analysis to tracking your water, to how much you're irrigating, to good recognized agricultural practices, including secondary spill containment for any fuels or oils you have on site, applying nutrients based on crop yields, crop yield targets, and not just blindly applying nutrients, so that we're maintaining good soil performance, good crop yield, and not ending up with any extra runoff or any excess nitrogen or minerals or metals in the soils.
Yeah, just a quick note there. As Christine pointed out, the MEAP program is actually through the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. But tell us a little bit about your DEQ permit as far as, it's obviously it's a groundwater discharge permit?
Correct, groundwater discharge permit. So we're allowed to process 600,000 gallons of effluent on our parcel annually. And that permit comes with a monthly reporting of our discharge quantities. We have assigned different application areas to our farm. We monitor for a lot of different parameters. We quarterly have our effluent analyzed, and we make calculations based on those analysis, so that we're not over applying nutrients. We also do our soil analysis, and we do that annually to make sure we're not accumulating any nutrients in excess of our nutrient uptake of our crops. So that crop model is also part of our plan that we submitted to the DEQ for the permit.
Are there any other questions?
Call it a Do you have any video for MEAP, John? Okay.
Okay. Just to do some quick housekeeping and wrapping up here, you will see there John's contact information. Brewery Terra Firma also has a Facebook page where some of the videos we showed earlier can be seen. That's our contact information there. And also the web links. We referenced the Forbes article from 2015 of the growth of small microbreweries across the U.S. in the last couple of years. The Brewers Association, and they also have a wastewater management guidance manual for those of you who are joining the session today from other states who, obviously your state code may have a different wastewater management code, a different permitting process. Our information, we have 3 more events coming up during April, which are on equally interesting and different ways of reusing product, of water conservation, of different ways of thinking about how we do water reuse, and also the link there to the MEAP program itself. And with this, I'm going to pass it back to John and Charlie, and any final words?
I'll let John have any final words. Thank you very much for your time and your answers.
Thank you.
No, actually, I guess I'm pretty happy. I think this went pretty well. Any of you who have interest in getting some additional information or what have you, you can always send us an email at breweryterrafirma.com. We have a contact us tab on that page, and we'll help you any way we can.
Yes, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully we'll see you next Tuesday when we're going to be looking at something equally innovative. You may be aware that a variety of changing climate and weather patterns has caused some serious deforestation across the West and the Midwest, and particularly because it's produced ideal conditions for insect predators. And so we're going to be looking at the pine beetle, which basically wiped out huge swatches of the western forests, but a certain individual company out there has found a way to reuse that in most innovative ways concerning water treatment and wastewater treatment. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to close the meeting. Thank you so much for attending, and any information you would like, Do let us know if you are particularly interested in the wastewater management for Brewery Terra Firma. Do contact John at the phone number, address, and website there. Thank you, and goodbye.